Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. What you will hear today is part two of a conversation that I had with Mark McKeon and Eric Zabiegalski. We had met each other through other people introducing each other to one another, and which is the way the Eddy Network podcast forms, which is people tell me, I know someone that I think would be a great person to have on the podcast. And I say, well, introduce us, just send us an email together and I'll respond back to them. That's how I'm meeting all these people. This is part two of my conversation with Mark McKeon and Eric Zabiegalski, and I think you'll find it just quite good. And so thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you again here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.
This is very interesting. And I think it's important. This is illustrated for me that it's important to um, to know yourself and to carry yourself in a certain way with a certain level of awareness and coherence as you move through life, not only to be a beacon for others, but to not be just a confusion generator, adding to the confusion.
Are either of you familiar with the work of Rene Girard on mimetic desire? Are you familiar with this?
No, no.
I would invite you to. I'll provide some resources for you. Mimetic desire is that desire to copy and to be like someone, and that it becomes mimetic conflict when, let's say, we are becoming like our teacher, and the closer we become like our teacher, the more conflict that there becomes, and so that's a lot of what we're going through. Is that we have become like people that we have desired to be like, and once we have done that, then there's a certain level of conflict that happens, and then that has this negative effect upon society. And so somehow we have to decide, okay, that they're going to be like similar to me, but we're not. But if we have to be in competition, we're not going to be very happy people. And it's a very interesting theory. There's a guy, a Canadian radio show guy named David Cayley, who did a series, I think, of 6 interviews with Girard. And then there's a fella at Catholic University in America, Luke Burgis, who has also written a book on this called Wanting. And I think it's fits into this thing we're talking about. So if your community is happy and you enjoy the people that you meet in your community, then your desire for something more is not as powerful of a motivator to overcome your circumstances as they presently are. And I think what we're talking about is, how do we create? I mean, we've created a little community here with the 3 of us, and we're very comfortable with that. And I don't think any of us are trying to be like the other. We're all just being ourselves, and somehow that comes together in a very harmonious way. I mean, and in this sense, to me, this is an example of what can happen in other relationships we have with people. And I think it's also a thing that the podcast can be a representation of. It can provide the image of what it means to be and to have a harmonious relationship with someone, because it is more difficult to do that today than it's ever been.
Yeah, and so many points, rich, deep points in both those commentaries there. On yours, as you were talking, Ed, I felt the energy, and I started recalling, for whatever reason, pictures of the human, like with the bacteria in the gut as the community, because that ties into, back to Eric's point, on the individual level. If the individual is conditioned well And this is subjective to a point because each of us are different DNA. We have different prints, so it's different, okay? And life is to be lived. I get all of that, but if there's a good condition in the human body physically, this concept of dualism that's been there a long time, then arguably the community, the bacteria in the gut, is speaking well to itself. It's harmonious. It's speaking well to the heart. It's speaking well to the head. It's no coincidence that when you change your diet, things begin to change. Your nervous system calms itself. Those vagal responses are less extreme. The hormones balance themselves out. Your body gets smart. It gets into Eric's point earlier on. This is where we link those dots and the principles come flooding in. Eric's point about slowing it down. The heartbeat, the Schumann resonance, the nature's flow, the golden mean, the middle way, whatever, the chi, all of the flow. Okay, and the flow is going to happen anyway, whether we like this or not. So the universe, the awareness, Eric and Ed and I, we've talked about this in the background, that awareness will take place and it will do its thing. And we can either get on board the bus or try and push it backwards the other way. But I know which way I'd rather go because I've been on both sides of that coin, so to speak, and it's been very difficult going against it. But to the point again, then earlier on, the choice, right? If we look at what the choices were, it's gratitude. It's saying, hey, like, there's problems, but here I am being different, and I'm not being contentiously so, i.e., oh, well, they're like they are, so that's good. You're actually saying, well, that darkness defines what I can be. So you become grateful for both the dark and the light, the yin, the yang. These concepts are just everywhere. And it starts there. And again, if to Eric's point, when we understand and have, this is what I think is the difficulty for me, and this is why I love humanity and accept that I don't think it is always the individual.
Asking questions is so important in life, asking questions of others. It shows inclusion. It shows respect. Hey, Mark, I want to know what you think about this. How how you can help. And it also slows things down, and we rush to answer so often and so much that we should really be spending more time diverging on questions before we converge. I think Einstein said something like, if I had an hour to make an important decision, I would think of the right question to ask for 59 minutes.
Right.
And then I would come up with an answer in the last minute.
This leads me to a thought, and maybe this is where we come towards a closing path to finishing our conversation today. But I think what we're doing here is important, period. I think it's the sort of thing that other people would benefit from. I'm in the process of rethinking what this podcast is and what I need to do with that. And some of it is having more group like this. Some of it is having some people who I talk for a longer period of time. Some of it is in doing what some people do, where there is, there are the short ones that I've done, and then there are long ones, and the long ones are there open for people who are willing to pay into a Patreon or some kind of system like that. I mean, all those are ideas that are floating around. But one of the things that I'm really interested in doing is seeing if it's possible to take what has been created here, and this is a co-creation with my guest. So this is just not me. I mean, it's a co-creation with my guest, and take that into a public environment. So the three of us, since you're going to be in Charlotte, and where do you live, Eric?
I'm in Southern Maryland. I'm in the southernmost tip of Maryland on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay.
Well, I was thinking that the three of us could put an event together and open it up to people to come, and we do something that mimics what these conversations are about. So we have an Eddy network gathering, and it's an unscripted, empty room except for the people in it, and we do something where it allows for people to begin to have conversations that have not been forced upon them, but they have chosen to say, "I'd like to have a conversation about this," and find some people who would like to have that conversation with them. If there's enough people, and we could do something like that. And I don't know really what that looks like, but the thought of having people come together for something like this in a physical place where they can meet and they can be together really has some appeal to me. What do you guys think?
I like the idea of just gathering together to talk and see what emerges and see what comes out. I'm always thinking about where the rubber meets the road, where the opportunity is to help or to do, to do something. And so I'm starting to get glimpses of, like, building blocks or what we're converging on, if we're converging on anything, and what kinds of things, but it's still sort of nebulous.
What are the best conversations beginning pretty nebulous at the beginning?
Yeah, yeah. And Mark said something a minute ago, and I wrote down something he said, made me write this down. I wrote down, when in doubt, comma, help. So if you can be of service to others, if you can be helpful in every situation, what if you led with that? Not obtrusively, not overtly, not vocally, but what if you just went with that simple agenda? I'm going to be helpful. I'm approaching these people, or I'm walking into my office, or I'm going into the grocery store. My agenda is to be of service, or my agenda is to be helpful. And we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point as well, Ed. I think Eric nails it there with what you're offering, or what an offering could be, is that it's the service. Your offering is to hold the space with us, because we know atoms at 99.9% space, so we all have space. But not only are we underutilizing our light, perhaps we're underutilizing our space. So somebody like yourself, and the world is built on great middlemen. Look at Amazon. I mean, I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying it's a good middleman. Yeah, I'm not advocating for any products here. So, but Ed, that is what you do. You just have a nature in a way, and to Eric's point again, in when somebody fully embraces that the soul is here for service, but it's also allowed to reap the rewards as it sows. So we're not saying don't have a great life and don't enjoy what you get in return. But if you lead with service first, I mean, the fundamental principle in space, you have to deposit energy to get somewhere else. You can't escape it here. It is as true there as it is here.
The challenge is, if you announce there's going to be an event, people want to know, well, what's the purpose of the event, and what's the topic, and I'm going to decide to go to the event because of the topic, and so that's part of the challenge. So I'm going to London at the end of October for Ian McGilchrist's a one-day conference on the future of humanity, and I decided that I'm begun to work with a woman here on the future of my whole social media thing. And I said, well, maybe I'll do an event there, and so I'm a part of a Friday group that meets every Friday, and And I said, well, I'm planning to come to this thing, and I thought about having an event, and two of the people said, I'll be there. And I said, that's what I need. I need that kind of energy to say, if I'm going to hold something, if I'm going to put my name on something, that people are going to know they're going to come to something and get what they get on the podcast. So that's,
And you know, the comment that Mark made that that atoms are 97% empty space, 98% empty space. And we call it junk DNA because we don't know what purpose it holds. But like that empty room that you provide, that has purpose. We just don't know what that purpose is. Some people wouldn't come to your event because it seemed purposeless. Well, this doesn't seem to have any point. There's no reason for me to go, so I'm not going to go. Or they would come with a specific purpose. I want to sell my process or my product, and then you would have, you know, that kind of conversation. But that 98%, that junk DNA, that empty room, has a purpose, and maybe it will emerge. We just don't know what it is. And maybe, to finish this with what Mark said, it's an opportunity to be of service. Maybe that empty room is an opportunity to be of service with whatever emerges, and we don't know what any of that is. Let's go and find out.
I just keep seeing Kevin Costner's face in the cornfield, hearing the voice. build it and they will come. Ed, if the curve isn't there, you create it, and and it's a risk. That's the problem. The time, the expenditure. It's always the risk, isn't
there's
it?
no risk. There's no risk. There's no risk.
You get out there and do it then. Come
yeah,
on.
But the crop yield was diminished by the size of that ball field, Ed.
Yeah. I don't care. I really, not that I don't care. I think that any positive energy expended has an effect, whether we see it or not. And
right.
I don't know how I got to today. I mean, literally today. I don't know. I just responded to what's in front of me, and it's led me to today. You know, and I started something. And I'd started it in a way to say, I don't want people to say no to me. So I made it easy.
Well, so I would push back on that a tiny bit, Ed. I would say that you created a structure, a scaffolding.
Yes.
But you didn't, and then you stopped there. You created a skeleton, and you invited the universe to fill it with something, to fill it in.
Well, the invitation says, give me an hour, no preparation. We'll talk about what we want to talk about when we meet. Yeah. And maybe that's
so you had that. Yeah, you had that limited structure. It wasn't confining. It wasn't deterministic. It was just, I'm going to build a scaffolding or a structure here.
Well,
and
maybe
let's see what happens.
To describe some kind of event is, give us 90 minutes, no preparation, and we'll talk about what we want to talk about when we get together. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah, but so what keeps something like that from me talking for 90 minutes about my ex-wife, and Mark talking about his broke down car, and you talking about your lousy neighbors?
Well, it needs a facilitator.
Agreed.
Yeah, and who I don't want to say I have an agenda, but I do. I mean, I have a purpose to this. I want. Okay, this is. I'm saying this not just to you two guys, but I'm saying it to everyone within earshot. I'm doing this because I want to show the world people who I respect, I appreciate, And I want these people to at least have some point in their life when someone has shown them that kind of respect and give them thanks for who they are and what they have contributed. I'm not interested in people who have something to promote or someone whose ego is always on display. I'm interested in people that I know who are simple people who make a difference in the world, and no one ever recognizes them for that. And because that's, when I talk about that there's a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of people, it's those people that I see that I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate. It's kind of like Mike Rowe and his dirty jobs and his other vehicles for recognizing kind of common people. It's similar to that. I love what he does. I see that this is a version of that, because how many people actually know who you two guys are? Not enough. But you have something to offer. You have something to contribute. And to say these two guys are contributing and they're valuable and you should know them. This is my way of introducing you to the world. It's a simple little thing. I mean, when I say, who do you know that you think I should know? Would you introduce me? This is my return, which is, this is who I know, and I want to introduce them to you. This is the give back. This is the give handover. This is the exchange of introductions. And I don't think I've ever really said it quite as specifically as this, but it really is about seeing things in people that I appreciate and I value, and feeling like no one has ever thanked them for it or giving them acknowledgement for that. And if I can do that, and maybe someone else will notice the same thing. And maybe someone will say, thank you. And then maybe they'll do some more than what they've been doing. I mean, it's really at a very low penetration level, but that's really what lies behind this. I mean, I see people walking on my street all the time. There's several of them I know, and I can't tell them, I can't wax eloquent about what I see in them, but I can say, how you doing? You doing all right? Thank you for what you're giving to the world. That sort of thing is basically what this is about. So if we could have an event where people walk away from that saying, I felt heard, I felt appreciated, that to me is what I would like to see happen.
Brilliant. Thought of a title, if it helps. Thank you for your service. Simple as that. And then people will say, well, what do you mean? And you just say, just being here, being you. Tell me about it. Who are you? Like you said in the store, the hardware store, Ed, you're just a guy walking in to buy some stuff to pay for a service because you value what they've got to offer, and from there,
because
the rest of it.
I do feel the same way. I do feel like everybody else,
Absolutely, but beautifully said, beautifully articulated, and
yeah, that's wonderful, Ed. And of those 160 podcasts that you've done so far, I reached out to many of those people, more about them, and I wanted to say hi. And I probably reached out to a dozen or more of those people wanting to connect and to know more about them. And yeah, I'm reminded of a North Carolina story. Do I have time for a quick living in North Carolina story?
You got another 20 minutes.
Okay. So so we bought a house right in the center of a little town called LaGrange, North Carolina, and the house was built in 1850, and it had gone through very little renovations since it was built. Um, I was one summer, I was around on the next block at a yard sale in an old Victorian house in front of an old Victorian house built in 1905. Beautiful, beautiful Victorian house. And the neighbor came out. I met the neighbor. I told him he had a lovely house. And he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Oh, my wife and I bought the old Thompson house." That's how you referred to the place you lived was, the most prominent person that ever lived there. That became the name of your house. And my house was once the home of Kermit Thompson, who was the mayor of the town back in the 1930s. I said, "Oh, I live in the old Thompson house." And there was this gentleman that looked like, you know, very reclusive older gentleman, just a few feet away from me, digging through a box, and he looked like maybe he, had physical or emotional challenges in life, and he was a local resident. He looked up when that neighbor asked me, and he said to both of us, he said, "You live in the Pulley house." And I said, "Pulley? I've never heard that name." And I looked at the neighbor with the Victorian. I said, "Have you ever heard the name Pulley?" And the neighbor said, "No, I've never heard the name Pulley before." John, to the man on my other side, he lives in the Thompson house. You remember the stories of Kermit Thompson, the mayor? And then the man gave me a look, kind of rolled his eyes, like, well, this local town citizen is sort of, not all there, perhaps. And then the guy looked at me and he said, "That's the Pulley house you live in." And that was the end of the conversation. We chatted about other things. It was a nice summer day. I went home. The following year, we tore out the roof of our house and we turned the big room, we turned it into a cathedral ceiling. So I pulled out the attic and I sheetrocked the roof to make it into a cathedral ceiling with the beams, exposed beams. It was gorgeous. When I was tearing out the roof, a letter fell out of the roof onto the floor, and it was a letter written in 1865 to a Miss Emma Pulley, asking her for her seamstress services in making some shirts and mending some clothes. And the letter was addressed to a Miss Emma Pulley.
So that was the first owner of the Thompson house.
Yes.
And then
nobody knew it, but this old town guy who everybody thought didn't know a thing and was kind of crazy. And I went back and told the town that story and the man's status, but people started to ask him questions about other things in the town.
Right. So they saw his value then. Yeah, brilliant.
What took you to LaGrange?
The military. I was in the Air Force at the time.
Uh-huh. You were at Seymour Johnson.
Yeah. The only Air Force base named after a naval aviator.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Back when I was in college, I spent a lot of time in Goldsboro. So I know it well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great town. And Mount Olive is just down the road, a piece where they make the famous pickles.
That's right. So, Mark, when is it that you're moving to Charlotte?
Well, I just quickly go to the embassy tomorrow to get travel down tomorrow. Thursday, I'll get the stamp, and then we're looking at being in Charlotte the 19th to 20th. So I'll stay in an Airbnb for a week, and then operationally, I think we go live on the 1st of October. And actually, while we're on, not a pitch at all in anything other than service. My job first and foremost is to employ local people, young people with ideally a recruitment background, some sales as well. Obviously, there'll be a fit for our culture, but anybody who's excited about sales or has listened to us today and thinks, you know what, I align to a lot of what these guys are about. My business will embrace that through right through and through in the culture, and it's a great time because we're just starting up, so they can be part of something right from the start. Ownership to service the communities in Charlotte and wider North Carolina into South. Going to do some Georgia as well initially. So if you guys know of any, I say a good but just young people who are enthusiastic, then that would really help, because I've got a list and I've been speaking to probably 1,000 or so over the last 9 months. Some graduates, demographic usually 1 to 2 years in, but we're going to need some help to do it, and it's got to be the community. We want people who are invested in Charlotte to build it, to help whatever build it means, whatever it needs. That'll be fantastic. If there's anybody listening at all that knows anybody that wants to be involved, it would be under my mentorship and guidance for sure.
What does the company do, Mark?
Get it right. Say again, sorry, Eric.
What does the company do, very briefly?
We're a recruitment company. So for me, in our vertical market, so to speak, it's construction focused. We will place everybody from a junior project manager right through to director of operations, vice president of construction, and everything in between. And also on the commercial side, estimating, junior estimators, some quantity surveyors. It's not quite the same model over in America as it is in the UK, but we don't do the trades. I used to do trades in England, but we're what we call the white collar role, so to speak. So superintendents as well. So anybody that that's of good stock and would do a good service to the clients we provide, because it isn't about me and my business. We're a link to good companies in Charlotte that are growing, that need more staff, and young people that want to help build their community, want to, it sounds dreamy and it's romantic in that sense, but that's the truth of it for me. It is just recruitment from another perspective as well in that sense. And people, in construction might not want to stay for 10 years in a company like we used to have. Maybe they want a 2-year sort of change, and that's fine too. You don't have to discuss that with the clients. We just go on the journeys and place people in the places that they want to be in right now. That's the most important part. So yeah, any help on that would be ideal.
I have a couple of people to introduce you to when you get here. One in Charleston, one in Greenville, South Carolina. So
I appreciate you, Ed. Thank you. And for today as well, and Eric, making the connection. I'd just like to say Tara Levon Gooch as well, and Diana Londono, who started. They were literally the first 2 connections that sort of encouraged me to write more on LinkedIn, and then we got connected that way. They've been catalysts in here as well in terms of energy. So I just wanted to thank them. If it gets back to them, who knows?
So the best way to find you two guys is on LinkedIn. Is that probably the best?
For me personally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
We'll put that in the show notes. And I have you have any parting shots? Anything you'd like to close out with? And as we come to a close, we've been after an hour and 45 minutes.
Can we have
Ed,
can we have some more time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that too. Maybe a part 2. Ed, where do you see hope for the future?
Sorry, that's funny to the community, because Eric's asked the question that Ed, I think, had for Eric.
Yeah, that was yeah. See what I just did there?
I appreciate that very much. I believe in people. I have hope for the future, and I think that one person who has a positive attitude can act in a viral way to infect a lot of negative people with a sense of positivity and give them hope. I think people are looking for hope. I know a lot of people who feel like the world is coming to an end, And I understand exactly mentally, intellectually. I see what they see, and I say, yeah, that looks like it's coming to an end. But I refuse to believe that that's the case. Of course, it's a part of my own faith, my faith life of believing that God is in the midst of all of this somewhere. Um, God hadn't abandoned the world, even though it may seem that way. But it's also a chance for people to trust the process, trust that, okay, something out of the ashes of what will happen, something really good will happen. And I think, and I felt, for over almost 25 years now, that what the future is going not to be ordered or organized around institutions, but around community. And the kinds of relationships that we're forming is a part of that. And I think what that really starts at is believing that other person, even if I don't share their opinions, is worthy of dignity and respect. And unless I can treat someone with dignity and respect, how can they trust me? And I think that's part of the challenge, is how do we create a trusting environment? I mean, I've written a lot about this, so you all know that. So my hope is to be a catalyst for hope, but not hope that is kind of a starry-eyed dream, but actually hope that motivates people to take action, as you say, be helpful, to serve. And I find what I have found in moving back to my hometown, in being this person that you all have come to know, that it's having an effect upon people, and that I don't necessarily understand, but I see the effect, and that people, I don't know what they see. They haven't told me that, but they certainly appreciate someone who is not negative or pessimistic, and someone who believes that each person is can be a contributor. I mean, that's, it comes back to the podcast. I believe that, I was, I think I've told this story before. I was at a bar during the NCAA basketball championships last March. I'm sitting at a bar stool at the bar. This guy comes in. His name is Al. Al's talked to me, and, so what do you do? He's a corporate kind of guy, and he's in corporate finance. And I said, well, I'm a leadership guy, and I have a podcast. And he says, oh, so who do you talk on the podcast? And I turn in my seat and I wave my arm across the entire room. I say, everyone in this room would be an ideal person to have on my podcast, because every one of these people has something to contribute. They have something to say that is worth hearing. They don't know it, but it's there nonetheless. And so that, you see, I see being the catalyst for people recognizing they have something to offer, and doing that by creating an environment of appreciation, that's where my hope comes from. And seeing people do things that surprise me. Oh, well, that's really good. You're doing that. Wow. And celebrate that. I mean,
what was his reaction when you said that?
He was impressed, and I didn't see him until last week. I saw him at a coffee shop. He says, how's the podcast going? I said, it's going great. I mean, this is, and I said, I still want to have you on the podcast. And he says, okay. So I gave him my card. Of course, I haven't heard from him yet, but everybody in their own time. So it's a very interesting process to go through. And it's because you're having to meet people that for the first time and cross all those different barriers of resistance to, oh, you're just another person, and all of a sudden, somehow there's magic. I mean, look at the conversation we've had in the last month. I mean, none of that was scripted. None of that was really intentional. None of us went looking for it. It just emerged because we were all three of us willing to contribute and to listen. And the contribution of listening is as important as the contribution as speaking. So that's where my hope is, Eric. And I feel that let me say it. I hope I live long enough to see this idea flourish. And I'm 71. I plan to live to 105. I've got a lot of work to do to get to 105, but I'm committed to getting there because I think about the next 34 years. Think about the last 34 years. Think about the next 34 years. I mean, and I think the next 34 years are going to be far more radically different and changing than anything any of us who are alive today has experienced. And it will not be simple. It'll not be some, Hallmark TV movie, where everything ends happily. No, I think there's going to be a lot of pain. But at the same time, we're going to see a new form of heroism emerge from people who are willing to suffer, to sacrifice, to make their communities better. And I think that's going to emerge. And it's not going to emerge because this is going to emerge because they desire to care for the people that they care about. And they find that if they don't have a choice, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to suffer in order to care for these people that I love. So love and suffering is a part of this. And that's another topic for another day, but it's really, it's almost like unless you are willing to suffer and you're willing to sacrifice, you'll never understand what fulfillment is or love is or community is or friendship is, because it's all too superficial otherwise. And the suffering and the sacrifice that we have to go through to care for people that matter or care for our communities causes us to have to give up. I mean, I'm going on, but I want to say this. I was talking with someone the other day, and I was introducing myself to them, and they said, "Well, tell me your story." And I realized, and the first time I realized this, that there were these junctions in my life where I walked away from everything I had done prior to that, and walked and started over. And it never crossed my mind that I was starting. I mean, I knew it was starting over in some kind of, I'm moving from North Carolina to Wyoming. That's starting over. But I didn't realize that all the things I had done up to that point, I was abandoning and leaving it back in the past. And I was starting totally new and going forward. And in recognizing that only, I think it was last week, recognizing it's just, oh my, am I going to have to go through this again? Is this podcast thing and the writing, is that just another thing for a particular period of time? I don't know. But I'm prepared for that so that nothing becomes I don't possess anything too much.
Right. And nothing possesses you too much.
And nothing possesses me so much that I sacrifice my own life in a way that doesn't contribute to a better life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
A long explanation, Eric, but that's kind of where no one's asked me that. So thank you.
That was great, Ed, and very, very deep, very thoughtful. I have so many thoughts come to mind from that.
It was genuinely heartfelt, Ed. You could feel it, you could see it in your expressions as you were recalling it and feeling it, and it resonates. There's no, service without sacrifice.
Oh,
And
when I walk out
Yeah.
my door, and I go to, go over to my coffee shop, or I go to my favorite restaurant, or I go to church, go to choir practice. All of these things are the context for that thing to be experienced.
goes
And
back to your choices and your intentions. You're intentional. You're on purpose. You're deliberate. And it doesn't have to be defined as such. It doesn't have to be going out your door and saying, people talk about this in the back, sort of before you set your day up, be intentional. I think there's another level where you get to where it's just you. You don't have to keep defining it every single day. It just is what you are. And that is then your example because you do it. Then that what other people see and the perspectives, well, it's manifested here, Ed, to let you know that what you're doing is important because it's important to me personally. I can only say that from a personal point of view. And listening to Eric's contributions and the way Eric engages Eric, I can't speak for him, but I would say on this call, it's fantastic. He feels value in it. And Eric obviously says that himself at some point. So yeah, I just want to thank you again for inviting me on and having and again to your point, a guy that's just
I think I think there's more to our future than our past. And Eric, I say this out of the depth of my heart. Thank you for your appreciation because you've gone over and above everybody else, and I thank you for that. And it means a lot because it gives me perspective and it gives me a reason to think that okay, this has more legs to it than I thought.
Well, thanks for saying that, Ed. When I got the invitation to be on your podcast, I don't know why I felt this way because there was nothing that prompted me um, to this, but something inside me said, this is important. This is going to be an important podcast for you.
I invited
And
you while I was watching you and Angela talk on the pie. In the middle of that, I wrote the invitation while it was in the middle of that because I knew that I needed to talk to this guy. I knew this thing about organizational ambidexterity is, oh, I've got to learn about this. I mean that was such a new idea, but it's so far beyond that now. I mean and I don't know what that means by so much far beyond that, but it's that there is this it's an emergent reality that's happened, and we're all three are part of this, and we
yeah,
all, and Mark, I see, our relationship as being neighbors here in North Carolina. I mean,
yeah.
You have an address yet as to where you're going to live?
No, not even that. Just come in and land in it. Going to get an Airbnb. We'll find out. The rest of it, honestly, just take care of itself. It always does.
I think we'll only be about an hour apart. So, and
yeah, welcome neighbor. And I'm not too far of a drive, so I think I'm going to have to plan a trip down south.
yes,
And I think maybe we should do something, Ed, in your community, either in Winston-Salem or in the town name of the town escapes me now. The town that Mayberry was modeled after.
Mount Airy,
Yeah, Mount Airy is not too far from you.
right?
Maybe we could do something in Mount Airy.
We could. So,
You know,
tourist destination.
you said something, Ed, and you only said half of this, but my brain immediately filled in the other half. You said, I don't possess anything too much. And my brain continued your sentence and said, because if you do, it will end up possessing you. And it's something that Dr. Rudy Tanzi says. He says the only purpose of the brain, he says the purpose of the brain is a creation machine. We are creation machines. We create thoughts, deeds, pieces of artwork, actions, facial expressions, and that which you create comes back to regulate, monitor, and govern you. So to me, that says be thoughtful about what you create in the world,
Yeah.
what you manifest.
I,
And, you know, yeah, this talk that we're giving and this beautiful talk that you've facilitated is going to have ripple effects for some of the people that watch it. That energy is going to change their behavior, change the way that they think, the way that they see the world, the way that they walk through the world. David Bohm also said that that a that a thought is a physical movement. It's a physical action. Having a thought is a physical action because even though it's very, it's on a micro level, it's very sublime. Synapses are firing, energy is moving, electrochemical energy is moving through your brain.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I,
wonderful.
and it's ironic that here we are, 2 hours into this conversation, which I think will now become a two-part episode, two episodes.
And it's just getting good. The conversation's just getting good. I'm joking, but not joking.
But we've not touched on embodiment and phenomenology or any of those things, which I think are so important to what we're talking about. I interviewed Johanny Pollisma, Finnish architect and phenomenologist, yesterday, and it was fantastic, And I think that there is something in that philosophic mindset that was born, almost a century ago, that has begun to sprout. The ground upon which it was planted is now beginning to grow through people like McGilchrist and other people. I'm looking at my stack of books here. Pollisma wrote this book here, The Eyes of the Skin.
Wow.
Architecture and the Senses.
That's cool.
The Thinking Hand.
Wow.
The Embodied Image. And his latest is Rootedness. And it's a series of lectures he gave to the architecture students at the University of Arkansas. It's all really good. And he's very much keyed into the nature of the embodied character of our lives. And so when you talk about thought being something that's a bodily thing, that's exactly what all these guys are saying.
Yeah, I didn't realize, I had no idea that when I wrote The Rise of the Ambidextrous Organization that I was channeling Ian McGilchrist. I had no idea that I was talking about the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain when I was writing. When I was drawn to the concept of ambidexterity, I had no idea that that's why I was compelled.
So when I started reading this,
to read it, yeah, because it's all about.
I felt like this was the annotated biography of my life.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. I think humanity is, I think the biggest threat to humanity is ourselves, humanity itself, and that the greatest war that's raging is inside our heads between the hemispheres, and which one will dominate and rule the day.
Well, if you look at um,
And the need for balance.
where the world of leadership is, it's very much trapped into a set of abstractions which require people to conform to or compelled to agree to.
And
And
abstractions are maps. They're maps, diagrams, they're checklists, they're all the things that the left hemisphere loves. You know, the left hemisphere sees reality and it says, "Oh, we can do that better. I'm going to make a map of it, and then we're going to follow the map." So instead of walking through the park, you walk according to the map that your brain creates.
Yeah.
And like Mark said, you miss that awareness.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's got implications, I think, for again, from maybe a more macro level, where the fields that people propagate from themselves, it's data. So inherently, the consciousness that's spinning locally and more widely now is there. It's just so much data, and it's inherently negative. The vibrations in people are inherently, maybe negative is not the right word. If they're inherently predisposed to more, not yeah, more left, right?
Yeah.
Then it's more rooted, it's more fixed, so there's less creative. It's not that, like McGilchrist says, it's not that they don't work together all the time. The predisposition in the mimicking of what we're seeing and maybe it's not what we're seeing, it's what we're feeling. So that the fields around people, the resonance feels more left because the data, if we're picking up thoughts, if thoughts are transferring across space time through the mind as electrical signals, electromagnetic frequencies, and we're picking that up, it's easy to see how as tuning forks for like a radio station, we're picking up the wrong information. So, and it's not the wrong, it helps, but we're too much of it. We've lost the idea of where's the creative dial on your graphic equalizer. Remember, that's how are we getting it to like tune in properly so that we get
Yeah.
melody?
So do you think that's a survival? Do you think that's deep in our survival, Mark?
I think we're beyond. I think like looking at Maslow's hierarchy and the transcendence models and things like that. Even going back to that, where we can talk primitively all we want, right? And there's a great saying about physical courage is in abundance, but moral courage is waning, and it has been waning for a long time. I'm paraphrasing these quotes because there's so many of them. And when I say there's so many of them, it's because the principles transcend space time. These were not invented. The principles are not invented by male, female person. They're manifested in their behaviors, in the energy and what we create here. So I think we're moving beyond this primitive sense of self, like monkey see, monkey do. But to a point, to Ed's point before, in mimicking, there's still going to be in our biological makeup some primitive aspects where if our mirrors here, mum and dad, for instance, through our heart connection, are the most connected to us in proximity as well as emotion, then arguably whatever that mirror is reflecting to us, we're going to pick up the most of. We're going to see it. And that's why you get peer groups in schools if you hang around with, and it's all about who you're surrounded by, not just because of their personality, but the frequency, the vibration that they're operating at. That ultimately will start to influence your own resonance, dumb it down, pick it up, whatever it might be, and you attune. And I think that's inescapable because of the way that we operate with those magnetic fields and electromagnetic effects. I really do. I think that's where the data is spinning. You listen to
You're
people.
saying that it moves in waves.
Well,
And
that's right.
to brilliantly to bring this back full circle to what you originally said and what Ed said, talks like this, gatherings like the three of us, are creating a wave, perhaps a wave of a different kind, or a wave that's new, a novel, or maybe um, reaching back to the way we did things before technology started to make us run fast.
Right, exactly. It's just an adaptation, isn't it, of trying to reconcile where we are so that we can tune it in to make it help it move forward linearly, but also appreciate there's a load of chaos in between trying to get. There's a lot of static, a lot of white noise. You know, that's why people go to nature, right? They go on holiday and they escape nature. Nature's home. It was never an escape. I mean, that's a cliche, but it's true. So I think these things can be for another discussion because there's science behind them all. There's some very
and we're doing this. We're doing this in the middle of the tempest. I mean, we're doing this in the middle of the whitewater and the chaos and our busy lives and schedules. We're intentionally choosing to slow things down and to have conversations that we don't know where they're going to go.
We don't, but they always seem to go right.
Thanks to Ed.
Amen. Amen to that.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Glad to be of service.
And to you, Mark, I want to say, be the first to say, along with Ed, welcome to the neighborhood.
Is it namaste they say in yoga, whatever semantics apply? I'm just going to say, cheers, fellas, in an English. Cheers, mate.
Well, I'm excited for you, Mark, because I mean you're a young guy and we're older.
From an English guy, yeah. So can't wait.
You're a young guy and you have a lot of years ahead of you, and you know it's exciting to see what's going to happen.
Sounds good, Ed. That sounds like a lot of faith in the years ahead as well. That's grand. I'll take that.
All I got.
Lovely.
That's all I got. A belief in people.
Love it.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. This has been remarkable. It's exactly what I thought it would be, and more. And I do think that this sets up a regular conversation that we can have publicly like this. And because I think people will find this valuable, and I think it also leads to other conversations that can be had with other people who now have been influenced by what our conversation. They say, "Well, I'd like to be a part of that." So I will say to our viewers and our listeners that if this is something, if this kind of conversation is interesting to you, then contact us, all three of us. You're going to have the connections to all three of us in the show notes, and whoever you want to talk to, you reach out to us, and we'll have a conversation, and without knowing where that needs to go, But more than likely, we're going to ask you questions, and you can ask us questions, and then that's where the real depth of insight will come from as we communicate with each other. So we're at the beginning of something, and it's kind of fun to be a part of it. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks, Mark, and I'll see you, Eric, maybe within a month or 6 weeks or so, and maybe we'll figure out some way to do that. And thank you for being here and for your appreciation and support. And thank you all for watching. Please sign up. Give us a like button. Hit. If you got questions, please offer them or comments. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.